My name is Jerm. This is Jerm Warfare, the battle of ideas. We are stable. Good morning, gentlemen. I have my coffee, freshly ground with cream, high fat, low carbohydrate. I still don't know. I still don't know if coffee itself is a good or bad thing. Nobody seems to really have a good argument one way or the other. All I know is that it's something I enjoy having in the morning. What about you?
As long as it's not Nescafe.
No, but that's not coffee. That's just instant nonsense.
Yeah.
I grind my beans, I beg your pardon.
Well, I think the cream is the cream's the important bit there. That's really what people should be focusing on. Although of course, it depends where that's come from.
You know, and I've had a lot of decaf recently, and it's way too bitter.
Yeah. Well, as I say, just take the coffee out, concentrate on the cream, and you'll be all right.
Man, this is a tough crowd. I've been engaging much to my own disappointment, and I've decided to stop, but I've been engaging recently with a few people on Substack who are still part of this relentless attack on me, and by extension, you know, you guys in UK Column, etc. But what I've been trying to do actually is just figure out what some of these arguments actually are, and I haven't been able to figure that out because a tactic is to remain vague, right? So the one guy said to me yesterday, it's just a feeling that I have. So it's, you know, he literally admits that it's just nothing really, and it came to my attention really that there is a strong disconnect on a sort of meta level here. There's a strong disconnect between reality and theory. There's like there's this chattering class, this sort of opinionistic class that focuses more on what they read on the internet and in books than what is in real life. Let me give you an example. So I live in South Africa, as you know, and we are consistently ranked as one of the most dangerous countries in the world outside of a war zone. We can go into why that is the case. I don't know why, but I suspect that there is a lot of foreign influence in our high crime to deliberately destabilize, for example, our agricultural sector. I'm very convinced that it's not organic. Rhino poaching, for example, is another one. I think that there's a strong connect between CITES, which is a UN offshoot, and foreign interests to destabilize one of the hearts of our country, which is, you know, wild parks. Now, before I was married, 2 of my ex-girlfriends were raped, right? One was gang raped. Now, this is reality. And one of these guys on Substack said to me, yes, but crime doesn't matter. We're talking about technocracy. And this is that disconnect that I'm talking about. And it bothers me a little bit that while there is an element of truth in the macro discussions going on, there's no understanding of the real world. Does that make sense? Am I articulating it correctly?
Yeah, that's happening at many levels, Jerm, and I think part of it is the way that people are reacting to what is, you know, a very how do I put this? You know, we are facing a very challenging environment, whether it's at the local level, the national level, or the international level. I mean, you know, I think we've mentioned this word polycrisis before. The BBC this morning, as I was driving in, the reporter was talking about polycrises, so multiple polycrises, and so we've got people reacting to that in different ways. Some people are simply switching everything off and hoping that it'll go away, which of course it won't. Others are attacking themselves, or at least people that may be aligned, may have been aligned in the past with them, and that's partly the attack on us and yourself. Others are focusing on, as you say, trying to ignore some of the stuff that's happening at a local level. Basically, everybody's looking for a way to just take some of the pain away, as far as I can see, and to divert from reality, as you say. And so, I think our job is to not do that and to try to remain focused on what we need to do and just not engage in, because there's so much out there that needs to be challenged. One of the other criticisms is, oh, well, you're focusing on international geopolitical things way too much. And my position on this is perhaps, but, this is our taxpayer money, which is funding foreign operations. And a very big part of that is this drive to convert the British economy. Same goes in EU countries. I mean, Germany in particular, convert our economies onto a war footing. And one of the things that I'm really keen that people consider is, if you think about what happened during the COVIDocracy and the Coronavirus Act, which was emergency legislation which came in order to restrict what people did. It was the legislative basis for everything that happened during those 2 or 3 years. If we think that was bad, if we end up on a proper war footing, the emergency legislation that comes in at that point is going to be 10 times worse, 100 times worse. So, what we're doing is we're trying to encourage people to focus on reality, and part of that reality is what's going on internationally, but also the impact that has on our daily lives. We are heading into an environment here where this country, the United States, EU countries have no money, and so they're increasingly moving into deficit spending to a degree that wasn't seen during the First and Second World Wars. And bearing in mind, it took 60, 70 years to pay the debt from the Second World War. We're orders of magnitude worse than that already. So these are things we should be considering, and we need to be trying to focus on what's going to be important for successive generations.
Yeah. I was at a friend's birthday on Saturday, and this is a cultural thing because it depends on where you are in the world. In South Africa, crime is a major part of our life. And it's easy to forget that when we talk about all the macro topics. But it is still a very real daily occurrence. My wife can't really drive around at night. It's just simply too dangerous. Doesn't matter where you are. In South Africa, it's generally too dangerous to drive alone at night if you're a woman, particularly. And yet again, in conversation at the gathering, crime came up, and the one guy was talking about how he had to get home because his wife was alone, and we all live in sort of security estates and that kind of thing. And something like this gets dismissed very quickly. This is something that I noticed literally on the first day that I arrived in Shanghai last year. The very first thing, that when I was able to connect to Wi-Fi and I looked at my WhatsApp, and there was a bomb blast that went off just down the road from where I live, 2 kilometers away in a gang area. And I immediately contacted my wife when I heard about that to see if she's okay. That was the very first thing. And I'm halfway around the world, and I'm worried about my wife and my child. And that's something that a lot of people forget. Vanessa understands that because she lives in a war zone. But most of these opinionistas don't. They type from their comfortable environments. I was looking at some data this morning, and I'm not downplaying, by the way. Crime, I know, is everywhere. But just take a look, just for context, all right? Japan, and I would have said this, if I'd gone to Tokyo and the same thing happened, I would have said the same thing. I would have spoken about Japan's low level of crime. That's pretty widely known that they have very, very low levels of crime. But look at this. By comparison, Japan has approximately less than 1 murder per day. China around 7, but we can maybe assume that China's crime stats are somewhat manipulated by the government. The UK has approximately 2 murders per day. I don't know if that's true. You guys can maybe challenge that. the US around 45 per day, and South Africa around 75 per day. I mean, that is phenomenally high in comparison.
Are those figures normalized for population size?
Yeah, it's it's per 100,000.
No, that can't be right. Or at least, I'm not saying you're not reading it right. What I'm saying is that only because I looked this up the other day. Last year there were 466 homicides in the United Kingdom. So that's first of all, that's not 2 a day. That's certainly not 2 a day per 100,000. So something's not quite right there.
Well, hold on, because 2 a day would mean almost 700 in a year.
Well, just over, yeah, exactly. But whereas the UK is not actually even at 500.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay.
Do you see what I mean? So
yeah.
That can't be right. But in any case, I mean, the fact is that the population of the UK is larger. What I can't forget, what's the South Africa population?
I think 60 million.
Okay, so UK a little bit over, and yet the murder rate is approximately 37 and a half times that of the UK. I mean, that is, I think that's the statistic there, isn't it?
Something like that, yes. Yeah, correct. And 90 times higher than that of Japan.
Yeah.
And that's...
Yeah. Well, is that a reflection, is that a reflection, Jerm, of relative poverty?
This is a good question, Mike. I don't know if poverty equals crime. Because if that were the case, our neighboring countries should have even higher crime. But they are safer. Zimbabwe is safer than South Africa. Malawi is safer. All our neighboring countries are safer. So I'm not entirely convinced by the argument that poverty equals crime. I think there are multiple factors, and we can only speculate because we don't know. And then, of course, we have the very unique crime of farm attacks, which I strongly suspect is foreign-backed. But the discussion is not about crime. It's about the dismissal of reality so that a narrative can be pushed. Does that make sense?
Well, I think it's, yes. I mean, but it's also which is the particular wolf at your door. And for you, your situation is very different. But I think what you're getting at is that the idea, the macro idea of the implementation of a technology, of a technate, that is not actually standing outside your front door and posing an imminent threat to you.
That's correct. For now, at least.
Okay. So, for now. So,
because the whole world is not the same. That's the point.
Exactly. And I think this is where I totally agree. This is where people do get lost, and this is where Mike is absolutely right to talk about the polycrisis, the polycrises, and the number that has been done on people. Because there are, I think the way I look at it is loads of different things going on, but what we're left with is a radically different sense of perspective depending on your circumstances. So I'm pretty sure I've talked about this before, but in fact, no, this was in conversation with Mike actually last week in the office, and my feeling, it's often said, oh well, the situation's got to get a lot worse before it gets better, and I don't mean that in a sort of doom-mongering sense, but I mean that until you can look and see that there aren't people considering that the most important thing in their life, and this is, I'm not just having a pop at people who do this, but it's just as an example. If the most important thing in your life right now is that you are called they, them, and your hair is pink, then obviously your perspective is very different from what you describe with the very real threat of, let's say, physical violence on a daily basis. And it just gives a really good indication as to the pressure that is not, in fact, yet felt by an enormous swathe of Western developed society, whatever you want to call it. But I would say Western European and British based. Now, there will be people listening who think, well, I live in what might be described as a crime hotspot in the UK. Yeah, okay, I'm not talking specifically to you then. I'm talking about in a general sense. We are still way off people really waking up and seeing what it is that should or could matter more in life. And therefore, the people who do prioritise the looming technate as the one big thing, I think are missing a trick. And the reason I think they're missing a trick is because, in actual fact, there are so many things that you could be doing that would head off that particular situation. So rather than speculating and considering what may happen or what the intent might be, if you concentrate your efforts on stuff that will benefit you in the short term, then there's absolutely no doubt it will benefit you in the long term. Effectively, it future-proofs you against such a thing. And I would say that is therefore where, in that example, where your efforts might be best applied. Going to the polycrisis thing, I think this is totally fascinating. And I think this is, there are lots of different things going on with this, but I've said this on many occasions. What was done in 2020, let's say all the way through till actually pretty much 2023, was an absolutely brilliantly played psychological operation, because what it conformed to, which again I think I mentioned before, is what is called, I'm sure lots of other terms for it, but Sallust's theorem, which is the idea that people are most greatly unified when there is most obviously a single point of focus for a threat. And therefore, in 2020, that was very obvious. Either you went along with what your government told you, which was that the threat was the virus, and therefore, people, to be fair, look on both sides of the fence, if we're putting a fence there, people absolutely did coalesce and really thought about what they could do to combat what they were told was a threat to life. Okay, so that worked. But on the other side, those that considered that actually what the government was saying was the most harmful possible thing, there was also a huge amount of cohesive activity there, because it was very obvious that there was one focus for where that threat was coming from. As that receded and the polycrisis took over, people absolutely lost sight of how to unify, how to concentrate on anything that was real. And I think what's replaced that has been very different for different people. But in large part, it has been replaced by, let's say, these sort of nebulous concepts that you can't quite pin down. And this again is an absolutely, this is an extension of the psychological operation. So they were, and when I say they, I mean, I'm not saying that there is even the requirement for a dedicated campaign to make this happen. I think this happens naturally when the threat recedes. It's exactly the same that in so many situations where there has been a tight-knit group for a particular reason, and then that reason no longer exists, then what? Let me look at the Labour Party, for example. Anyway, I think this is exactly what's happened, and it has enabled people to look at things that, frankly, are a distraction from making those meaningful changes in their lives. And the other part of it, which I absolutely think is again a psychological operation. And just to define terms, when I say psychological operation, I'm not saying that you've got the thumb twiddlers in GCHQ and MI5 sitting there thinking, oh, this is what we'll direct them to do next. I think this is just what happens. And look at what as the story always goes about the Black Panther movement, it was destroyed by the inference that there was stuff going on inside that organization that they'd been infiltrated. And I think that is another element of what's going on now, is this people wanting to look round and find an enemy within. Now, that is incredibly destructive. And that is exactly why, even if somebody does think that the technate is the problem, rather than the bomb going off down the street, or rather than the risk of being carjacked or raped or whatever, the fact is that they are prepared to switch fire to you as a target and think that they must now have an argument with you or with somebody else that holds a different opinion. Now, again, a sort of an evolving psychological operation, but I do think all these things are very, very closely related, and they are an absolutely masterful distraction, because we're absolutely back to the same old principle of divide and rule. Yeah. So that's my sort of take on how these things work together.
The polycrisis is the polycrisis narrative is absolutely spot on. Digital ID is also being rolled out in South Africa, but only in small pockets, because if you know the layout of the land, you'll know that it cannot be countrywide. It just simply cannot when you have millions and millions and millions of people who are not even connected yet to any kind of grid. It just simply cannot happen. And cash is still very, very strong because of that. We have and I think it's a good thing. I think it's a blessing in disguise for at least the short to medium term. But, I mean, the point is that we have multiple battles that we're fighting. It's not a one-trick pony. It's not only digital ID. Hence the term polycrisis. There are multiple battles. If you're from the UK, I don't think crime is first and foremost on your list of things to worry about. You probably have other things. It's probably there in the top 10 maybe. For us, culturally, in South Africa, crime is probably the number one thing. If you look at the immigration stats and why people leave the country, crime is almost always exclusively the reason. So if I go to a country like China, it doesn't matter if it's Japan, even if it's the UK, and I feel a lot safer. It's something that's, as you said, it's the wolf at my doorstep. It's something I notice immediately because it's kind of ingrained in who I am. Where I live on a farm, a country estate, right? Let me explain to you quickly about our security. We have an electric fence around the entire farm. We have then trees on the other side to make it harder to get to the electric fence if they wanted to climb over. We have infrared beams all over the property, and during the night, at every 3-hour interval, we have a security walking around with torches, just checking in on everything. And that's on top of the dogs and the geese and all the sort of natural sort of deterrence. Now, that's not really normal living, is it?
Well, I mean, it is for you. I think that's the point. But no, I mean, this is it. Again, I absolutely will not be at all dismissive of people whose concerns in the United Kingdom, in parts of the United Kingdom, whose concerns are primarily crime. They absolutely are. I mean, I've worked in the police. I know within the area that I was policing, I absolutely know of places where it's an awful life for people. It is a constant revolving door of police sort of intervention in situations that never get any better. So there really are places that absolutely are like that in the United Kingdom. I mean, I'm sure the situation will be broadly similar in much of Western Europe as well, and that absolutely must not be dismissed. And so therefore, I would contend that, exactly like you've articulated, that people who live in those areas, those sorts of situations, will be much more pragmatic about the manifestations of the technate, and therefore they will be thinking more about how they actually practically making a difference to their lives. Because this is the other element. We talk about this an awful lot, and in my constant refrain, I know I am broken record, but I'm afraid I don't really make much apology for it. If you're going to say, right, well, we're resisting this, we're resisting that, it's the sort of the corporate beast is going to do for us all, and the public-private partnership and all these things, and you say that, and you are, in a sense, sort of active on that front, and yet you are still going around the corner to buy your goods from a multinational corporation such as Tesco, which is basically symbolises everything that's gone wrong in the balance between the individual and the state, the individual and the sort of corporate world and all the rest of it, then my take on that is you're not quite getting it right, because you are funding your own demise. But again, that is a difficult situation to work your way out of. All I'm saying is I think you have to be realistic about what it is you can achieve and how that will benefit you. Yeah. And so start with the things that you can change. I mean, I know this is sort of where we come back to an awful lot, but the reason for that is that it is so important. And the other thing is there are really heartening examples of people who have worked that out and have broken outside, I would say, really critically broken outside of the sort of the the closed loop that is the internet or the social media platforms, and they have gone out and spoken to people and have made real world connections, because that is really where things get done. Talking to people face to face, and just that moment that is so hard to achieve online of just discussing this, that, and the other, and someone will say, oh, well, I mean, I can do that, or I know someone who sells that, or whatever it is. It's just, and I know that this sounds absolutely ludicrous, because after all, 20 years ago, this is how everything worked. Maybe a bit more, but we've so quickly forgotten how to do that, how to get things done, how to properly organise and resist. So I think
that's the key word, Charles. Resist.
Yeah.
Right. And the thing that people need to relearn or learn in the first place is how to resist. And attacking each other is not resistance. Resistance is not buying stuff from the supermarket. It is, we are creative beings, and it seems to me that we have abandoned largely our creativity, and we're just sort of waiting around for somebody else to solve all our problems for us. And the same goes. I mean, I understand what you're saying, Charles, about the areas of high crime in this country, but and you tell me if this is unfair. This issue of high criminality in certain parts of the country has been going on forever.
Yeah.
And there are community leaders in these areas, but there doesn't seem to be a willingness in the community at large to get involved in solving the problem. And I mean, even just, you're talking there about face-to-face conversations. And of course, one of the places that these used to happen was the local pub. And over the last 40 years, we've seen the systematic destruction and shutdown of pubs in the UK. And more people are just staying at home and sitting in front of the television. Even just getting out and going to the pub would be an act of resistance, and going and talking to people. And so, we sort of got a hint that people were to some degree remembering how to resist during COVID, but it's all been abandoned again. And I think that's the one thing that I would love to see people thinking about is what does it mean to resist?
And I just want to make it clear, I'm not trying to present some sort of victimhood Olympics here by pointing out our crime stats, right? I'm not trying to say, oh, I'm in a far worse position, because if I really was, I would have emigrated and I would have gone to a safer country. This is my home, and I am accustomed to living in a certain way, and we have to be streetwise, and I have no intention of emigrating. I do love living here. But the point I'm making is that there is nuance and there's complexity, and a lot of these chattering classes forget about it. I think it might have been Vanessa who said to me the other day, she saw my chat with Ravoya, and I'm not going to say anything bad about Ravoya, but she said that in the first 5 minutes he pulled out like 10 books to make his case. And that's an interesting observation, because you can get very caught up in academia and just completely forget about what's happening outside the front door where the wolf is, as you pointed out, Charles. And in, let's say, your country, a bigger threat might be digital ID. And someone said to me, yeah, but that is the slavery. Well, listen, I can tell you right now, when you've got a high crime rate, you are a slave in many ways, because you cannot do things for fear of being hijacked or stabbed or shot or something. There is a sense of slavery in that, and to resist that, as you said, Charles, is one way to push back, and you've got to fight that. Slavery takes on many forms.
Yeah, well, I mean, I would totally agree with that. I really would, and also I think the other thing is that if one becomes drawn towards looking into more conceptual targets, let's say, for what it is that you consider is wrong, I mean, the early example being the technate, then I don't see that, this is the other issue, I don't see that as being exclusive from concentrating on the, let's say, the smaller things. There's no reason that you can't, I mean, okay, silly example, but that you can't grow your own food and still resist digital ID or live facial recognition or whatever it is. It doesn't. This is, I think, where I do not understand. I don't understand why people, because I think this is what you were meaning at the beginning.
The one-trick pony.
Just sort of, just putting everything else to one side. And the way I would say it is if you really apply thought to it and you plan correctly, and after all, that's what we have to do, then you should be able to make everything work. Everything should synchronize. And for the simple reason that I think if you're going to pursue a better life, then it has to be better in every respect. It's not, why would you just think, oh, well, everything will be all right if as long as there isn't digital ID. So what are you saying? So if there's not digital ID, you're still happy to pay cash for ultra-processed junk that's going to kill you? Or what? I mean, the whole thing. So I'm not, I hope I'm not now contradicting myself, but the polycrisis as a psychological operation has absolutely meant that people have, on the individual level, become discombobulated. They have not known quite what it is that they should prioritize. And on the collective level, that has splintered organizations because there has not been any clear idea of where a campaign should necessarily go. But I would say, well, if you put together a coherent way in which you can live your life, then you are doing all these things anyway. And I think that's the bit that I don't really understand. It seems to me extraordinarily simplistic to be concentrating on something that, let's say, even though there are practical examples of it in the world so far, but much of this is still conceptual. It hasn't happened. But if you're only going to concentrate on that and say, well, crime down the road doesn't matter, or eating such and such a thing doesn't matter, or pollution or whatever it is doesn't matter, then to me that's a fail on loads of levels. But mostly because I don't see that it's impossible to live a life in such a way that that does wrap all these things together.
Well, I mean, it's multiple battles being fought. This is the problem. This isn't a one-trick pony battle or war that we're in. There are, Mike said, it's a polycrisis. There are so many nodes that are being connected all over the place. And for example, again, I said earlier, farm attacks. Now, farm attacks will become more global. We know that the Netherlands, the farmers are increasingly under attack. You see, so
okay, yeah, but that's really, I mean, bearing in mind this is germ warfare after all. Let's extend the terminology. We're exactly right. You're talking about battles, but it is one war. These are absolutely, like you say, they're all connected, but they are battles that are totally interconnected as part of one war. Now,
correct.
You cannot possibly stand any chance of winning a war if you're only going to concentrate on the specifics of each battle and not regard the connectivity between them as absolutely related to whatever strategy you come up with. Now, that's it. That is really what I mean. Whereas the way that the polycrisis works is exactly what I'm driving at. Is that it gets tossed out, and it makes people forget that just because the COVID thing or the vaccine thing has been removed as the war, that the war is still in existence. It just doesn't look like that anymore, and therefore the battles are all part of that.
Look, I want to make one point on that. The question is, who's the war with? And my war isn't with anybody that's criticizing me, or it's not with the government.
Absolutely.
My war is with me.
Absolutely.
My war is absolutely with me and my choices in life and how my choices affect the wider world. There is no other war because if I make the wrong choices, I contribute to what government, deep state, whatever you want to call it, is doing. If I make the right choices, then I'm contributing to the resistance on that. The war is with me, and it's every part of my life, and it's every day, every minute, every day, and so that's I think that's a really important consideration, because if we're always looking at the other person and we're always fighting the other person, then we're never addressing the reasons why any of this stuff happens in the first place. It starts with me, and it starts with you, and it starts with Charles, and it starts with everybody that's watching this program. Yeah. And we've got to recognize who our enemy is. It's not something that's external to us.
That is very, very well put. I think you've just condensed into 60 seconds what I've probably fumbled around, spent about 20 minutes trying to articulate. That is exactly the point. And that what that also does, which is totally critical, there are so many benefits to considering it like that, but what that does is it insulates you against exactly what has happened, which is that a great threat is developed and then whipped away. And if you've been concentrating on what's going on over there and suddenly the thing that's over there doesn't exist anymore, you are completely lost. And that is how it's done. Whereas if you are, exactly like you say, you're concentrating on what you're doing, then it doesn't matter whether the thing stands or falls or changes colour over there, because you have still improved your lot. And that's the bit that matters.
Yeah, when I was at my friend's birthday on Saturday, my good friend Nick Hudson was there, and he loves chatting about this stuff. And we spoke about exactly this, which is why I'm talking to you about it. And he, again, made the point that we live in a complex world. There's no dismissal of digital ID. I'm not trying to reduce its severity, but there are multiple things going on, and we are fighting multiple battles. Lord of the Rings is a great example. There's an ultimate war in the story, but in order to get to that point, they fought multiple battles along the way, and they had to create alliances along the way with people that they normally wouldn't hang out with. The elves and the dwarves would never get on under any normal circumstances, but in the story, they had to come together for a particular battle, at the end. And we all know the story. And I think that's a wonderful metaphor. It's a complex system, and it's not a one-trick pony. Different guests have different strengths and different things that they focus on my show. I was criticized for having Stuart Fishbein on last week when he was talking about home births and the importance of understanding the over-medicalization of childbirth. Someone said, like, why does this matter? Like, how can you actually, in your heart of hearts, ask me why that matters? The fundamental, the foundational vector in your life is your birth, and that affects in so many ways how the rest of your life is going to be. And it does matter how many injections the mother is getting and all sorts of things. These things absolutely matter on a very, very, very foundational level. And it baffles my mind that can be disregarded.
Sorry, Jerm, let me just interrupt there a second, because otherwise I'm going to forget this point. Yes. But I think this is really... Why does that matter? It matters because everything is being turned into a medical... I mean, I was... Very, very rarely happens, but for whatever reason, the television was turned on in my house a few days ago. And,
whoa! Okay.
But hold on a second, because sometimes it's good. Sometimes it's good to see what Channel 4 News is doing. But anyway, in the ad break, one of the ads was I can't remember exactly the phraseology, but they're suggesting obesity is an illness, a medical problem, right? And suddenly everything is being turned into a medical problem. Obesity is not a lifestyle problem or a matter of choice about diet, or the fact that we're eating stuff which is described as food which isn't. It's now a medical thing which requires medical intervention. So you can continue doing the really bad things that you've been doing, and we'll give you an injection to sort that out, which of course doesn't. But, put that alongside the fact that the British government now puts folic acid into bread because some pregnant women need, they say, an extra dose of folic acid. So we've all got to be mass medicated. Look at the fluoride agenda in various parts of the world, mass medication again. Everything is we are being turned into the farm animal, as it were. So, I just thought that was a really fascinating development that we're now seeing things which are the result of the choices that we make being turned into an illness for which they will then provide a pharmaceutical intervention, undoubtedly. They already are.
And that's another one of the polywars.
With ourselves.
And health.
Because because our health is a lifestyle choice. That's a choice we make largely. So, sorry for interrupting.
No, it's fine.
It's an extremely good point. It's a very, very important one. And again, let's just say that's another good example. We could take that one thing and isolate it, but if we did, we'd be missing so many other things. Think of what it's related to. I mean, one of the Friday's UK column news programme was a lot, again, quite rightly so, about Palantir. Well, Palantir is absolutely wrapped up with what is described as health. It isn't health, it's data. And if you are healthy, then no one gets your data because you're not going down the route of being poked and prodded and being told you need this and you need that. And then, you're perpetuating the cycle of data, debt, and drugs. I mean, that is another thing that you step outside of, and this is why the battle with yourself, exactly like you say, Mike, or you going to war with yourself, or whatever. We need to come up with a phrase for that. But that would be a prime example of it. You step outside of all that, and the money. I mean, think of the money. It will vary by country, but in the United Kingdom, again, the National Health Service is spending costing you over £500 million every day. And to put that in perspective, again, the farming budget, the total farming budget, separate issue, I don't believe there should be one, but the total farming budget would be eaten up by the National Health Service in the space of 10 days. So there we go. A great illustration of how to sort out your situation by concentrating on yourself.
I don't really have a direction, generally speaking, in this particular banter. I was kind of just sharing my disappointment, I suppose, in the fact that we, perhaps even at UK Column, we're supposed to be focusing on one or two things, and that's that. I can't, in my heart of hearts, I can't focus on one or two things because I know that there are multiple battles going on. My wife's pregnant, for example, and how my child comes into the world is very, very important to me. And that goes beyond just the injection in his arm, which he won't get, or vitamin K, which most people don't know about. There's a whole thing that happens. It's not about just getting the baby out. It's so much deeper than that. And that's for my child, that's where life begins. And I, as the father, want to make sure that he has the best life. I can't only focus on digital ID. I've also got to focus on health. And as you said, Mike, the choices that we make. So discussing the over-medicalization of childbirth, for me, is very, very important. And I know it's important for many others.
But that's, sorry, just to interject. I mean, crikey, they're the same thing. You live on the African continent. I mean, that's the model for getting hold of the individual and all their data and everything is via health. That's how it's done. Look at all the digital ID programs. They're absolutely wrapped up with, from birth, vaccination and pharmaceutical interventions. That's how it's done. It's these.
Yes.
It's sending supposedly do-gooding medical teams, sort of independent medical teams, out into rural or any community, telling them that there's something wrong with them, giving them a shot in the arm, and then they're on the system. And then, hey presto, you're digital identity is also that your sort of passport to better health, because you're in the system and it will protect you. So these things are absolutely directly related.
Ebola currently is making the news again.
Yeah.
Or quote unquote Ebola.
Hollywood
because
does.
wherever you see that, you see pharmaceutical interference every time, without fail.
Yes, of course. Yeah. Yes. I actually, will you just take a note? I would hope that there will be somebody out there who can talk in a sort of balanced and objective sense about the way in which Ebola is treated by the media and has been over the years, because it cannot have escaped people's notice that Ebola only ever happens in the same places. Now, anyone who's even heard of terrain theory must be scratching their heads there, thinking, well, we've had outbreaks for decades, or so we're told. How come it's never persisted in Japan or Siberia or Bolivia? Why is it always in the same region of Central Western Africa?
What's environment? So in that sense, it's probably based on.
No, it's not, Jerm, is it? I mean, come on. Do you not listen to the BBC? So what I would like is somebody to just go into a bit more depth on that. Because it's the big one, isn't it? Every single time, if we really need to have a good sort of shake of the shoulders and come on, don't be dismissive of the hantavirus sort of smiling rat. It really is out to get you. And just to remind you how bad these things can be, oh, look, Ebola has gone and erupted again. And Dustin Hoffman's there and he's got the suit on and all this stuff. So I think it was him. Anyway, so if you can find somebody... Wasn't that Dustin Hoffman in Outbreak? Anyway, whatever. But maybe that wasn't Ebola. I can't remember. But I think that would make a great guest, somebody who can deal specifically with Ebola, because it is, apart from the supposedly the plague, Ebola is to the modern world the jack in a box that comes out when we need to be reminded that we can all die within seconds.
And yet, it's not all that major of a crisis to what I think 200 people have died recently, according to the latest outbreak, quote unquote. But yet, go and have a look at where it's happening. Go and have a look at the sort of mining setup that's going on there.
Yeah, of course. That's what I mean. But but then there's got to be somebody lurking there who will have actually spent the time putting all this together and can map it out and everything else. So if you can find somebody, or indeed if anybody's listening and knows of somebody who has such a background, that would be great, because I think it is one of those. I'm not going to describe it as a myth. I'm not saying nothing's happening, but whatever is happening is absolutely not what's being described.
I mean, if it were an actual outbreak, then it should spread.
I mean, this is the thing, and yet somehow, yeah.
But I mean, again, it's part of the polycrisis. It's the ongoing thread of this particular conversation, the polycrisis.
Yes, it is, absolutely. Yeah, and masterful. Why would it distract you if you are sitting in Belgium? Why would you be distracted by an outbreak of what is supposed to be a very serious illness in that part of Africa?
Well, remember we said previously
Belgium being a bad choice given the history. Sorry, that was an accident, but yeah.
Yeah, there's always the threat. Yeah. The threat of what happened in 2020 and 2021 is always hanging over our heads, and that's all they have to do is to mention hantavirus or Ebola or some other minor issue, bird flu, swine flu, whatever it happens to be, and that immediately puts people's stress levels up because people are basically still suffering from PTSD as a result of what happened.
I mean, what is the solution here, right? So I do get sometimes disappointed, as I said earlier, by these attacks that say, oh, you're creating a fog by so many different topics or whatever, or you are you're saying nice things about China. How dare you? I mean, I'm trying to figure out if you just do you approach these things head on, or do you ignore them, or do you continue with them? I'm trying to figure out what the right strategy is here, Mike.
The right strategy is to continue. I mean, our one of our mottos, as you will know, is that he who is silent is taken to agree. Now, of course, that doesn't mean that I have to engage with every single criticism that comes along. My view is that I am not silent, but I'm going to stay focused on what I'm not going to be silent about, if that makes any sense. So, my view is that there are only 24 hours in a day, so we've got to pick our battles, and fighting amongst ourselves is not one of the battles that we should be engaged in. And so I will continue to speak out on the issues that I think are important. Charles will do the same on the issues that he thinks are important,
and me,
as will everybody else that's involved with what we're doing. But anything else is diversion. And why would we allow ourselves to be diverted by people that aren't contributing anything to the actual issues of the day?
Yeah.
Somebody attacking me, they can attack me all they like. It's not something that I feel that I need to react to in any way, because that's not contributing to the direction that I want to go in.
Vanessa made
I don't know if any of that makes sense.
No, it makes sense. Vanessa made a similar comment on Substack, I think just over the weekend, where she said it's disappointing to see people on the same side firing bullets at each other. And what they should be doing is perhaps focusing on their common enemy, or if this is not possible, then you need to continue fighting and leave behind those people who are firing bullets at you.
And that's exactly right, with the exception of the at each other, because I refuse to fire bullets back. It just seems utterly self-destructive for us to be engaging in internal, what we may view as being internal battles, because we view the people that are attacking us as being, generally part of the resistance movement, the broader resistance movement. Why? I just don't get it. But so I'm not interested in that. I want to keep my focus on the people that are pushing the policies, the agendas, the wars. That's where we should be keeping our focus.
I totally agree. I think that goes back to what we started out with at the beginning. It's you must not get distracted or deflected, and this is exactly a distraction and a deflection. And I think any sort of attack, the like I say, the sort of the turning inwards and attacking each other. I mean, I'm afraid my feeling on that is that it says any such instance says much more about the person doing the attacking than it does about anyone else, and also that it shows a singular lack of ability to focus on the things that do matter, and on resistance, and on improving the self. I mean, essentially all the things that we've been talking about during this discussion are quite clearly not being prioritized if time is being spent on how to attack somebody who is ostensibly on the same side. And in actual fact, when I say on the same side, I mean that really should incorporate absolutely everybody except those who are with intent trying to foist a particular system onto all of us. And therefore it shouldn't matter what your view is on climate, gender, health, or any of the other nonsense. We are absolutely all categorized in the same way by those that are trying to implement these systems. And I think that's how we have to look at it. And if we don't, we are failing ourselves. We are absolutely falling into yet another gigantic poo trap. So that's the way that's the way I would consider it. And again, yeah, I mean, as Mike says, as part of the not being deflected, not being distracted, to engage in any of that is, first of all, I think it would be well below the level of dignity that is appropriate for life. That's one significant part. But what is the possible outcome? What can be achieved from doing that? That is positive, and if you're not able to make a positive contribution, then I think really you need to be reconsidering quite seriously. But again, as I say, I mean, going back to I think what is a really important point. Maybe I didn't stress it enough earlier. I do think this is absolutely a psychological operation that this is happening at all, because the underlying message is because you're looking at the world slightly differently from me, there is something suspicious about that. There is something going on. There is something wrong, and I am not to trust you, as opposed to just thinking, okay, that's a slightly different take on it. And this is the point, is that it is this Black Panther suggestion of infiltration, as though somehow there are sort of string pullers that are making such and such a thing happening, making them happen, rather than people just coming up with their own conclusions. So I think if people are thinking that that's happening without absolutely hard evidence, then that is a absolutely gigantic waste of time, and again it's another trap.
And also, I think another trap. I made this point a few days ago that, I mean, there's no such thing as the truth movement.
No,
there isn't. It's just some sort of artificial binary, that's been created to create some sort of tribalism. I don't think anybody, even Bill Gates, I don't think anybody wakes up in the morning thinking, I'm going to side with lies. I think they believe that they are not on the side of lies, even though I fully disagree with their approach to just about everything. I don't think that anybody actively, thinks that they're not looking for the truth out there. You know what I mean? I don't think there's a truth movement. I think there are just people wanting to figure things out. And they happen to align in some areas, and they happen to align in other areas. And I think those alignments are very, very important. If you want to win battles, you need to create allies.
Yeah, you do, but I think it's a rather sad reflection that these are the terms within which we're speaking, or that we're framing it. And frankly, people should be in the state of mind that they want good outcomes for all. So it's not it is not wholesome, kind, and fulfilling to be thinking that you only want a certain sector of society to triumph, prevail, or succeed. Yes, okay, we can all think of many, many people who supposedly had the world back to front during, most obviously during the COVID years, where people did want others to go out and get jabbed and this, that, and the other. But I mean, if we're not able to look at people just in general with kindness and positivity, or at least to assume good faith, then we are sunk, I think. So I don't think any of this should be limited. Just because there are some who are prepared to actively resist doesn't mean that okay, we talk about doing these things for yourself. Yes, you are, but you are doing that in order that you reach a tipping point where the situation improves for everybody. So this is not a selfish pursuit, even if the focus is and has to be on the individual. I think that's just a very important thing to cling to.
Okay, I'm looking at the time. It's been a pleasure chatting to both of you, gents. I will catch up with you next week.